All right, boys and girls, moving right along. Let's talk about decimals and fractions and the relationship between the two. If you remember from previous video, we looked at models like this and we came up with the fractions and the decimals of each. So if you look at this red one, it has the rods, so there's 10 of them in each. There's 10 of them to make this whole grid, so that's in the tenths place. And how many are actually colored in? We've got 3 of them colored in. So that would mean that would be 3/10. Now remember, if you think about the way you say that, 3/10, that fraction also has a decimal counterpart, and that is 3 in the tenths spot. Okay, let's look at this one. We've got the flat, and there's 100 squares in that, so it would be 100th. And then in it, if you remember, there's 8 full rods colored in, plus 5 more would be 85. So if we listen to ourselves say that 85 hundredths, then that decimal would look just like that, 85 in the hundredths place. But what happens if we don't have a fraction that's cut and dried? How do we create a decimal from that fraction? For instance, if we have 3/5. Okay, the trick is you have to have the denominator be one of the 3 place values that we've learned in decimals. So if you remember our place values, we've got the tenths, you've got the hundredths, and then we will be kind of touching lightly on the thousandths. So your denominator has to either be a 10, it has to be 100, or it has to be 1,000. So if we look at the 5, what could we do to the 5 to make it a 10, 100, or 1,000? Well, you really could do something to the 5 and get each one of those. So let's actually pick the one that's closest. We want to make this 5 a 10. So what could we do to the 5 to make a 10? Well, we can times it by 2 and it would make it a 10. Remember the rule, whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So whatever you do to the denominator, you have to do to the numerator. So you would times that by 2 as well. And you're going to create an equivalent fraction, which would then be 6/10. Okay, so now that we've got that, they're equivalent, they're going to be taking up the same amount of space, but if you say the word, or the fraction 6/10, then you can clearly see the decimal that goes along with that, which would be 0.6. I did it again, so 6/10. All right, so what happens if we have another one? Let's try for 25ths. All right, so now we've got to think, what can I do to my 25 to get 10, 100, or 1,000? Can I do anything to 25 to get 10? Can I multiply 25 by anything to get 10? No. Can I multiply 25 by something to get 100? Yes. Could I multiply 25 by something to get 1,000? Well, probably, but let's actually stick to the hundredths place. So what would I have to do to the 25 to get 100? Times it by 4. So whatever you do to the denominator, you do to the numerator. So I times that by 4. The equivalent fraction that I would get for 4/25 would be 16 hundredths. So now when we say 16 hundredths, you can see the decimal that would appear. 16 hundredths. So in these two examples, your decimal that would go along with 3/5 would be 6/10. The decimal that would go along with 4/25 would be 16 hundredths. So the main rule when you're trying to find the decimal that goes along with a fraction, the main rule is that you make the denominator a 10, 100, or 1,000 by multiplying it by something. Whatever you did to the denominator, do to the numerator, and then you'll have an equivalent fraction, and that equivalent fraction will be able to be made into a decimal by that time. All right, thanks.